So we've built our title graphics and now we're ready to animate them so that they come to life. Animation is achieved using keyframes. Keyframes can be thought of as little position markers on the timeline. If you want something to move from point A to point B, your first keyframe on the timeline is your starting point, point A. Your second keyframe further down on the timeline will be set with different position coordinates. It doesn't have to be position, it can be rotation, scale, or whatever else. So as the playhead progresses on the timeline, our object slowly moves to that position. So this is the concept and the method that we're going to use to animate our title graphics. So let's jump in. First, we have to know our starting position. Right now, our graphics are in what we'll call our fully opened position. But we don't want to start here. We want the graphic to extend or grow or flip out into this position. Right now we have the result we're looking for, and so that means we'll animate backwards on the timeline to get to our starting position. So I only want this graphic to take about a half a second to animate into this position. And since I'm on 30 frames per second, I'll place the playhead on the 15th frame. In the background border, I'll open up the transform options where I can enable keyframing by clicking on this dot next to the scale settings. That set the result of where I want this box to end up, here on the 15th frame. Now I'll move the playhead to the beginning, or the first frame, and drop the width scale down to 0. Now as I move the playhead along, you'll see this box appear and grow to my end result on the 15th frame. Now what I'll do is go to the end of the timeline and place the playhead 15 frames from the end. Then I'll click this button, which adds a new keyframe with the exact position information as the previous one in the timeline. Now I'll move my playhead to the end and drop the scale's width to 0 again. So this animation grows, stays there, and then shrinks back down to 0 at the end. But the movements are a bit harsh, aren't they? They start and stop too suddenly at each frame. To smooth this out, we'll start with the first keyframe on the timeline. From here, we want our animation to smoothly build up speed so it looks a little more natural to the eye. Simply right-click, and in the temporal interpolation options, I'll select Smooth Out, because we want it to grow smoothly out from here. And since the next keyframe is where we want the movement to ease into, we'll change that one to Smooth In. Now as we play it back, we'll see our growth, or our movement, is nice and smooth. At the end of the timeline, we'll do the same so that we get a nice smooth out, settling into a nice easy end, or in. You can get more advanced with keyframe easing by playing with this value graph, but more on that in another series. Before we move on to the next step, I'm going to quickly set the same type of keyframe into the opacity of the text to help give the illusion of growth. So now that we have one piece of our graphic animated, it's super easy to do the rest because all we're going to do is link the other layers to follow the animation set on this plane. While the playhead is placed somewhere in the middle, we'll simply parent the other layers to this one by changing this from none to the layer with our keyframes. There we are. It's as simple as that. Next week, we'll take this another step further with 3D animation. Until then, enjoy animating your awesome title graphics and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. See you next week.